Bill, I can go 8 ways here, particularly off of Angela Stent's work on Putin, my book of the year last year, but I can't. We've got a battle of Stalingrad going on right now in Ukraine. The Russians had to stop the Nazis, and they did with a wall of bodies. Translate that analog that Mr. Putin knows over to what we're witnessing in eastern Ukraine this evening.
Well, Putin basically doesn't care about the number of casualties. He has this huge military advantage that death of his soldiers doesn't even make him sleep worse at night. And so they're losing soldiers at a rate of 5 to 1 of the Ukrainians right now. They're throwing convicts, conscripts, and anyone else who they've been able to corral into this meat grinder. They're throwing them into battle and they're being mowed down. These people oftentimes don't have even the proper armor, guns or whatever, and they're being shot down on a major basis. And the purpose of this is to try to just soften up the Ukrainian lines. And no matter how good the Ukrainians are at fighting back, if wave after wave of soldiers are being thrown into this meat grinder at the Ukrainians, it has a negative impact, and that is going on right now as we speak. And it's, if you watch All Quiet on the Western Front, which is about World War I,
Right.
This is the same type of tactics that are going on right now as we speak in Europe today.
An Oscar contender there. Bill Browder, when you were at Chicago, you and I were weaned on Thomas Schelling, the giant theorist on war and game theory. You've been courageous about saying, look, this is all about Putin. But what has changed in the last year? When Browder talks about Putin now, what's new?
Well, the main thing that's new is that Putin is showing himself to be totally not credible in all of his chest-thumping alpha male threats. He has a weak military. He didn't win in 3 days. He's running out of ammunition. His gas blackmail against Europe didn't work. They found alternatives. He thought that Europe wouldn't, in America and the Allies wouldn't react harshly. We have. He thought we wouldn't supply weapons. We have. And so he's completely, I would say, misjudged this war from start to finish. And as a result, Russia is not in a strong position. Russia is not going to win this war with the capacity and the capabilities they have right now, particularly if the West continues to provide weapons, which we're doing.
Which raises a question, how can we expedite the end, especially if it's basically a meat grinder at the front lines, which is tragic to watch on all counts. You used to be one of the largest foreign portfolio managers of Russian assets. I mean, how far we have come from that time. Financially, have we done everything possible to perhaps expedite an end to this tragedy?
Well, there's really 2 areas that we need to be continuing to help the Ukrainians on. The first, on the military side, is that they have asked for jets, which we have not provided. They've asked for long-range artillery, which we have not provided. And they've asked for a certain number of tanks, and we've only given them a fraction of what they've asked for. On the financial side, it's the one thing we can really do for them is to starve Putin of the financial resources to continue to fund this war. And we have done a lot on the financial side in terms of sanctions. But the one huge loophole in this whole system, and you could drive a truck through this loophole, is the sale of oil and gas from Russia to the West and to the East. Putin receives between $500 million and $1 billion a day, even after all these sanctions, after all the disconnection of Russia from the Western system. And that money is enough money to continue to fight this war into perpetuity. And so we have to figure out a way to stop him from getting that money, because as long as he gets that money, there's no stopping this war from his perspective.
It's deeply painful to read the articles, the very human articles about what's going on, the fighting, the victims of this fighting. Bill, I wonder how long it will take and whether this war can end with Vladimir Putin still the leader of Russia.
Well, there's 2 ways that this war could end. We could give the Ukrainians enough military weaponry so that they finally overcome Russia, which I think they have the capacity to do. Or the other thing that could happen, and this scares me a lot, is as the war drags on, and again, as I should point out that Putin doesn't care about casualties, And so he can throw more and more men into the meat grinder, more and more casualties. And as it grinds on, the West can lose interest. And you're starting to hear noises in Washington, particularly out of the sort of far right of the Republican Party, the Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, the Tucker Carlson. Let's not finance Ukraine anymore. That's what they're saying. And if those fringe people start to become mainstream, America is the single most important backer of Ukraine right now. And if America were to step out, if there was a change in leadership in 2 years' time, Putin could win the war that way instead of winning on the battlefield. And so that, in my mind, is probably the scariest prospect that we're facing right now as far as Ukraine is concerned.
Bill Browder, can the dramatic exercise work now? The Ukrainians shocked with damage to a key bridge to Crimea a number of weeks ago. So many in the West seem to be looking for a dramatic moment to put Mr. Putin in his place. I'm guessing that's the thinking of children.
Well, not necessarily. Remember in the summer last year, completely unexpected for me and for anyone else who's been following this, the Ukrainians broke through the Russian lines and retook 54% of the territory that Russia had previously taken. It was dramatic. All the different places they pushed Russia back, and the Russians were running back, retreating. And it's not entirely impossible. And interestingly, where I get this little inkling that there's some chance of that happening is from the Russians themselves. This guy, Yevgeny Prigozhin, Putin's chef, the head of the Wagner group, this mercenary group.
Yeah.
He's out there screaming bloody murder, saying, if I don't get enough weaponry from the Russian government, we're going to collapse, and then everything will collapse. He's the one saying it. No one else is saying it. He's the one saying it. Now, it may be for internal political reasons, but if I hear him saying that, it makes me feel like, maybe there's a second chance for the Ukrainians to do the same thing that they did last summer. On the other hand, Putin has unlimited numbers of people he can throw at this, and he doesn't care whether they die.